MARD was a man of unshakable principles, a figure both respected and feared in his village. His strength wasn't just in his fists, but in his unwavering sense of justice. The village, once peaceful, had fallen under the rule of Thakur, a ruthless landlord who treated people like mere pawns in his game of power. MARD had no interest in conflicts, but injustice was something he could never turn a blind eye to. One afternoon, cries of distress filled the air as Thakur's men dragged a helpless farmer from his land. His family pleaded, his children clung to his legs, but the goons laughed, kicking dust in their faces. MARD watched in silence at first, his fists clenching. He stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "Enough." The men turned, sneering. "Or what?" one of them mocked. MARD didn't answer with words, his fists spoke for him. A single punch sent the first man flying, his body landing in the dirt with a sickening thud. The others hesitated for a moment before charging, but MARD was swift, calculated. Within minutes, the ground was littered with groaning bodies. He stood tall, unshaken, while the farmer and his family clung to his feet in gratitude. Word traveled fast. Thakur sat in his grand mansion, a glass of wine in his hand, listening to the news with growing fury. A mere villager had dared to challenge his rule? Unacceptable. His grip on the glass tightened until it shattered, crimson droplets mixing with the wine. "MARD," he muttered, the name laced with venom. That night, a storm brewed, both in the sky and in Thakur's heart. He summoned his men, his voice cold and final. "I want him broken. Burn his house, crush his spirit. Show the village what happens to those who defy me." The village, unaware of the storm to come, remained silent in the dead of night. MARD sat outside his modest hut, sharpening his father's old dagger, unaware that shadows lurked nearby, waiting for the right moment to strike. The first thing MARD noticed was the smell, thick, suffocating smoke curling through the cracks of his hut. Then came the heat, the sharp crackle of fire-devouring wood. He grabbed his dagger, but before he could move, the door burst open. Shadows swarmed him. A blow to the back of his head sent him to his knees. Rough hands dragged him outside, where flames turned his home to ash. Through blurred vision, he saw Thakur's men sneering down at him. One of them delivered a vicious kick to his ribs. "Bravery has a price," the man laughed. They bound his hands and hauled him away like a captured beast. At Thakur's mansion, MARD was thrown onto the cold stone floor. Thakur stood above him, expression unreadable. A man who fights should know when he's already lost. He circled MARD slowly. "Your strength is meaningless here. Your village will watch you break." MARD spat blood onto the floor, but said nothing. Thakur signaled his men, and the beating resumed. Every strike sent waves of pain through his body, but he didn't scream. That would be victory for them. He wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Days passed in darkness. No food, no water. Just cold walls and the taste of blood. The villagers had abandoned him. He didn't blame them. Fear was a powerful weapon, one Thakur wielded well. He thought of his father's words, "A true man does not surrender to pain, only to his conscience." But what use was conscience in a world ruled by cruelty? Then, footsteps. A faint light in the darkness. A soft whisper. "MARD, wake up."
"Mira."
He barely recognized her face in the dim torchlight. She pressed a water-soaked cloth to his lips. "We don't have much time." She worked quickly, cutting his bindings, helping him to his feet. His body screamed in protest, but his will remained unbroken. She led him through narrow corridors, every step a battle against pain. Outside, the night was cold, the wind carrying the scent of damp earth. They ran. His legs threatened to give way, but he forced them forward. The village appeared in the distance, but it was not the home he once knew. Doors were shut, lights dimmed. A place gripped by fear. MARD stopped, breathing hard. "They won't fight," Mira said, her voice filled with sorrow. "Not unless they believe they can win." MARD looked at the sky, dawn creeping in. He had a choice, disappear into the shadows or stand once more. His body was broken, but his spirit wasn't. Thakur wanted him to fall, to be forgotten. But MARD wasn't done. MARD knew that fighting alone was a death sentence. He needed the village, but fear had silenced them. He walked through the narrow streets, past homes where people peeked through cracks but refused to open their doors. His presence was a reminder of what they wanted to forget, that defiance had consequences. He reached the old well where a few men gathered before dawn. They stared at him, some with shame, others with doubt. "Thakur will come again," MARD said, his voice hoarse but steady. "And this time, he won't stop until you've given him everything." A heavy silence followed. A younger man scoffed, shaking his head. "You think we can fight him? His men are armed. We have nothing." MARD met his gaze. "You have your hands, your strength, the land you work on, the families you love. He has nothing but greed. Men like him win because we believe we've already lost." An elder stepped forward, his face lined with years of hardship. "What do you want us to do?" MARD looked around at the hesitant faces. "Stand with me." It wasn't an immediate victory. Many still refused, too scarred by years of oppression. But a handful agreed. That was enough for now. They trained in secret, using whatever they had, wooden staffs, farming tools, even their bare hands. MARD pushed them hard, knowing there was no room for weakness. Thakur's men were warriors by force, but his people had something stronger, the will to protect what was theirs. 2 days passed before Thakur sent his warning. A messenger arrived at the village square, reading aloud from a parchment. "Surrender MARD by sunrise, or the village will burn." The man smirked as he rolled up the paper. "Thakur is generous. He allows you a choice." MARD stepped forward. "And here's mine. Tell Thakur I'm waiting." The messenger's confidence faltered, but he quickly turned and rode away. That night, fear settled over the village like a thick fog. Some whispered that they should give MARD up. Others packed their belongings, ready to flee. MARD sat alone near the dying embers of a fire, sharpening his father's dagger. Mira approached quietly. "They're scared." "So am I," MARD admitted. "But fear is only dangerous if we let it stop us." She knelt beside him. "And if we fail?" MARD's grip tightened around the dagger. "Then at least we fought." In the distance, torches flickered like fireflies in the night. Thakur's men were coming. The first arrow struck the ground near MARD's feet, followed by another that buried itself into a wooden cart. Thakur's men marched forward, torches in hand, their leader riding at the front with a smirk. "Still standing, MARD," he called out. "I expected you to run like the rest." MARD stepped forward, unshaken. "This land belongs to the people, not to you." Thakur laughed. Brave words for a dead man. He raised his hand, signaling his men to attack. MARD's allies moved into position. The villagers who had once been too afraid to fight now stood beside him, armed with whatever they could find. The first wave of soldiers rushed in, confident, but they were met with resistance they hadn't expected. Farmers fought like warriors, using sickles and staffs to knock them down. MARD moved through the chaos like a storm, his fists breaking bones, his dagger finding its mark. The battle raged, dust and smoke filling the air. Thakur's men faltered, unprepared for the villagers' determination. But Thakur himself remained calm, watching from a distance. Then, with a nod, he sent in his elite guards. The tide shifted. MARD's allies began to fall. The fight was slipping away. Thakur dismounted and walked through the battlefield, stepping over the wounded. "Enough," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "This ends now." MARD turned to face him. They stood inches apart, the battlefield forgotten. Thakur drew his sword, its blade glinting in the firelight. A man should know when to kneel. MARD's grip tightened around his dagger. And a tyrant should know when he's lost. The duel began. Thakur was skilled, his strikes fast and precise, but MARD was relentless. Pain seared through him as the sword grazed his arm, but he didn't stop. He dodged, countered, and with a final burst of strength, drove his dagger into Thakur's chest. Thakur staggered back, eyes wide in disbelief. He fell to his knees, blood staining the earth beneath him. The remaining soldiers, seeing their leader defeated, dropped their weapons and fled. A hush fell over the village. The people, once broken by fear, now stood victorious. MARD, breathing heavily, looked around at the faces of those who had fought beside him. They were no longer just farmers or blacksmiths. They were warriors. Mira stepped forward, her eyes filled with relief. It's over. MARD looked at the rising sun, the sky painted in shades of gold and crimson. No, he said quietly. It's just beginning. The village was free, but MARD knew freedom was something that had to be defended. He wasn't just fighting for today, he was fighting for every tomorrow to come.